It's come to our attention and understanding that science does not always give us the answers. So, when this is the case, where do we go to? So far, we've realized that religion is another area of knowledge people rely on, and so is ethics. Throughout this unit, we've studied both of these areas of knowledge and have been exposed to several examples of these. The first one, Heaven or Hospital, the story of Juliana. This is a great example of a controversial event between the areas of knowledge of religion and ethics. For starters, the ethical discussion began with the decision of the parents allowing her dying 4-year-old daughter to choose between life and death, because some might argue that she has no understanding of the concept whatsoever. In my opinion, the topic of personal versus shared knowledge becomes really important because regardless of empathy or sympathy, no one will actually walk a mile in Juliana's shoes. People, including her parents, are only aware of the medical condition itself, but they do not understand how it is to live it. She's the only one with knowledge about what it is to live day to day with her condition, and that is what incites her response to the heaven or hospital question. This event connects to faith, language, and imagination within religious systems. All of these ways of knowing blend together if you think about it. Juliana's parents took advantage of the use of language to be able to transmit the heaven or hospital question. Through language, they were able to paint heaven in a certain way, as something pretty, holy, and at peace. She was going to meet God, and she was going to reunite with her grandmother. This interfered with Juliana's imagination by creating this new perception of heaven, influencing her decision. Finally, I believe that this whole situation represents a consequentialist or utilitarian approach because in the end, Juliana's parents only want what is best for her. They want her own happiness. Project Prevention. Cash for Sterilization. This text we read straight away presented a very controversial ethical issue. In order to avoid more babies being born to drug-addicted parents, Barbara Harris founded Project Prevention, which consisted of offering drug-addicted women $300 in cash if they underwent sterilization or long-term birth control. For some, this is totally bizarre because it may be considered a bribe or taking advantage of a woman's necessity of money for more drugs. Once a person is a drug addict, they say they're not in their sane minds to make that decision. In my opinion, regardless of the opposing argument, I do agree that this is a voluntary arrangement. No one is being forced to it, rather they have been given an alternative, a trade-off. Something Harris said, which I found very important, was, some argue that drug addicts desperate for money are not capable of making a truly voluntary choice when offered easy cash. But if their judgment is that severely impaired, how can they possibly be expected to make sensible decisions about bearing and raising children? I do understand the viewpoints of those who call it bribery or coercion, yet I believe that the needs justify the means in this situation, and it all depends on how you decide to perceive it. A more religious person perhaps would be more respectful and sensitive to this issue, given that they might consider getting pregnant a blessing, something from nature, yet their addiction gets in the way. In this case, a good is being subsidized to improve a specific situation, that is no more or no less than a future child's life. I believe Harris was strongly attached to emotion as a way of knowledge based on her personal life and the fact she adopted 4 kids from drug addict parents, but I believe that the largest influence for her project was the ethics behind it, in seeking for a solution and aid for the unborn children and fighting for their rights as well. The second example is pranksters read verses from a Bible disguised as the Quran to prove a point. The title of this experiment may already sound problematic to some, because a great issue in ethics is the whole topic of deception. RKS plays a role because of the incorporation of religious texts like the Bible and the Quran, and the simple fact that the religion and its holy texts are taken as a prank may already be an insult for some religious believers. But this example highlights personal and shared knowledge. Religion is mostly a shared knowledge, but how you interpret it makes it more personal. This prank serves as a test of how much people actually know from the religion. In the case of the chosen people, they were surprised by the excerpts read because they're not familiar with them. Based on incidents or examples that they've gone through throughout their lives, people tend to have this schema, an association of negative, aggressive, violent traits from the Quran, but not of the Bible. This relates to memory as a way of knowing, based on their associations. If they're raised in a Catholic home, they're not exposed to the extremist messages, but rather the good ones. The experiment also tested people's faith and emotion because the majority of their reactions were of shock and amusement. They were not aware that the religion in which they expressed their faith could have such strong messages. As humans, we seek for answers in religion, sometimes because it teaches us values and morals and the right code of conduct. The fact that the Bible had strong messages was a surprise to the participants because they did not know that part of it. Maybe it was because it was an Old Testament. Maybe they didn't know much about the Bible. But in the end, those were the results. In conclusion, the whole point of this video was to see where do we look for additional answers. As mentioned previously, science doesn't give them all. Therefore, human beings decide to rely on other ways of knowing and areas of knowledge, like religious knowledge systems and ethics. We like to believe we do the right actions for the right purposes. We like to believe in something greater than us because we have something or someone to rely on. All of these examples represent something different. Heaven over hospital represents the influence of religious knowledge systems, the descendants of religion in a family, and how it can get to influence a life or death decision. The second example, cash for sterilization, brings up a controversial issue about ethics and how do we actually know if we're doing the right thing or if we're using the appropriate means, whether we're promoting something bad or our means erroneous. The final example wants to prove that even if we base ourselves in religion, we still do not know all the answers. We leave it up to our faith. The people in the video did not know the excerpts were from the Bible, but that does not mean they're not firm believers. Religious knowledge systems and ethics are a way of conducting our actions. When looking for answers, we look up to one or the other to make sure that what we're doing is right.